any way that you can find to fund your projects, if there's some money out there to help fund your book, particularly if you're doing like something that's nonfiction or a little more niche appeal, absolutely. I would say you would do that first. You try and get the grants to write the book, and maybe get some money to help toward publishing. That doesn't mean you can't run a Kickstarter too. I mean, they don't say, well, this is the only money you can ever use to get your book going, right? So Kickstarter is just a piece of the publishing plan, and it's an important sort of initial step or early step. It doesn't have to be the very first step in terms of what you're doing. I know some people who have had really good luck with subscription platforms. There's Kindle Vella, there's one called Royal Road. Sometimes people do their Patreons and they get interest in a book that way, and they get even some money up front, but then they take their serialized book and then they take it and put it up on Kickstarter and do a Kickstarter to make it into a whole real book. And then that book gets later released on retail platforms. So there's a bunch of different approaches. So let's see. So that's, keep yourself muted. Yep. What expenses? Yeah, so one of the things to know is that Kickstarter isn't pay to play platform, but they take a percentage of everything you raise once your campaign funds. And we'll talk about funding goal in just a minute. But in general, it's a good idea to sort of add an extra 10% to all of your costs when you're using Kickstarter. Kickstarter takes 5%, and then they also take credit card fees out of that. And so if you just sort of figure, well, I'd like to raise this much, so bump that by 10%. Or I think my book is going to cost X to produce and to ship, so I need to increase those numbers by 10%. The other expense that you will have before you start running Kickstarters are, you will need your cover art, highly recommended. I see a lot of people in the Kickstarter for Authors group who say, oh, well, I need to raise money so I could get a cover. But this kind of plays right into one of my first points, which is, what is Kickstarter? So Kickstarter is a crowdfunding platform. It's an all or nothing platform, which means that if you don't hit your funding goal, you don't get any money. The project doesn't get made. People have no expectation that they're going to be getting your thing. Only about 38% of Kickstarters succeed in hitting their funding goal. So it's not unusual for Kickstarter projects to fail to hit their funding goal. And there's no really stigma about it. It's hard. It can be emotionally tough to not hit your funding goal and to know and feel like, oh, I've disappointed all these people who were there to support me. But you don't get a black mark against you on the platform or anything like that. If you have the stamina and wherewithal to pick yourself up and try again, you've learned a lot. Try another run. But one of the things that we talk about a lot in the Kickstarter for Authors group on Facebook, and also that I address in my book, is really being really realistic about your funding goal. A lot of times people see, like Brandon Sanderson. No one's going to set their funding goal for $42 million, right? Just because Brandon Sanderson raised $42 million almost exactly 2 years ago. So you have to be realistic about what do you need to produce the book, but not much more above that. A funding goal is not your aspirational goal. A funding goal is a floor, not a ceiling. So one of the things that we recommend is to keep your funding goal to kind of a nice low minimum. If you're doing a print-on-demand book, set your funding goal at $500. And if you're doing a print-on-demand book, but you've had to pay for illustration, if you're doing like a kid's book or something, then, give yourself enough to pay the illustrator and to get the book printed. But, nothing beyond that. Don't try, and one of the common missteps I see a lot is people trying to fund use their Kickstarter to fund all the fixed costs of bringing a book to market. If you can, if your Kickstarter ends up funding, more than you asked for, which if it's well set up, it should be, then that's great. It helps defray a lot of those costs. But you're going to be putting your book out anyway, ideally. And so expecting your Kickstarter to pay for all of those expenses is, it would be nice, but I recommend that people don't set their funding goal at like, well, my editing, my cover, my art, okay, I'm going to need like $3,000 to get this book out, because chances are with your first Kickstarter, you might not hit $3,000. You might hit $2,500, but you don't get any of that if you don't hit your funding goal. So being realistic about what do I need bare minimum to just get this project made? Not, gee, wouldn't it be nice if I could bring in $10,000? So that's a real common kind of a thing. Another really important thing is to remember that Kickstarter is not GoFundMe. This is not a place where you go on and you say, oh, I'm a poor starving author and I just need some money so I can like live and write my book and maybe gets it edited. And like, that's a GoFundMe approach. It's not a Kickstarter approach. Kickstarter backers want to be part of bringing some exciting new project to life. And they want to support that, and they expect to get that thing when it's done. So it's not a pledge. It's not, I mean, it is a pledge, but it's not a donation. It's not like, here's some money and maybe I'll get something. Kickstarter backers pledge for certain reward tiers, and they fully expect to get those rewards, which is why if you don't fund your Kickstarter, no one's expecting to get those rewards, because they're like, well, didn't fund, not going to get my thing. That's fine. But just knowing that really Kickstarter is not quite a retailer, although you're selling your thing. What Kickstarter really is like a pop-up store at an event. It's like you're going to a con and you're tabling, and you've got your table, and you're like trying to attract people. Oh, here's my beautiful shiny thing. Come and look, come be a part of this. It's half pop-up event, half retailer, half party. There's some wonderful Kickstarters out there that really engage backers, and it's this sort of communal, we are bringing this to life, we're making it happen. We unlock the stretch goal of being able to foil the dust jacket, and we could foil it in green or purple. What do you think? What should we do? And then everyone gets involved and on board, voting on some of the artwork sometimes, things like that. If you're the kind of person who that sounds really fun and exciting, then great. Definitely embrace that aspect of Kickstarter. If the idea makes you want to run screaming for the hills, that's okay. You don't have to be super, super interactive with your Kickstarter, but be aware that the whole point is bringing a creative project to life, and that Kickstarter backers are as interested in who you are as a creator as they are in the project in some ways. So Kickstarter is not GoFundMe. It's an all or nothing platform, and you want to go in not with a help me because books are expensive. You want to go in with a, hey, this is what's in it for you, the backer. If you help bring this project to life, you get this fabulous book. Maybe you get some bookmarks. We'll have a big Zoom meeting afterwards with everyone who's been part of the Kickstarter and do a Q&A. Yep, all of these extras that you can bring to the platform. So I'm jumping over and looking really quick at what incentives are attractive to prospective backers. Yep. Without breaking the bank. Right. Absolutely. So often, and it's interesting because right now in books, if you've been on Kickstarter at all or following, there's this huge explosion of special edition books, super fancy editions, foiling, sprayed edges, bells and whistles, particularly among romance, fantasy romance, kind of jumping on the romantasy bandwagon, right? There's people who are doing book boxes all the way up with candles, mugs, XYZ. You don't have to do that. You can do a very basic POD Kickstarter campaign. In fact, my first 8 campaigns were POD. It's only my last one that I just finished that I'm actually commissioning a print run for. So everything else was print on demand up to this point, without tons of bells and whistles. My first, I think, 3 campaigns, I didn't have any swag whatsoever. I didn't have bookmarks. I didn't have character cards or extra artwork, just the book. And the kinds of bonuses then that people are interested in are maybe extra bonus content within the book or ebook. Do you have a novella or a related short story? Or can you have a goal to, if we fund up to this amount, so we hit our funding goal, but let's go higher. And if we hit that amount, I will write a new short story in this world that can accompany the book. Things like that. Things like you could just do a postcard of the cover art, like with the title and everything. Or you can, if you have the rights to the art, or if you can get your designer to license you the artwork, maybe just the artwork as a print postcard or as a digital piece of art that everybody gets. And that's very low cost. Printing postcards are at 50 cents, 30 cents each, somewhere in there to print. If you print them in bulk with places like Vistaprint, Gotprint, Moo, there's a bunch out there. Watch for their sales. And then that gives you swag. If you go to conventions or book events, you probably have some bookmarks or some little things, and those are great for Kickstarter, but you don't have to pile that all on. Sometimes people do maybe put in a black and white illustration in your book, and you can commission that, or maybe ask a friend to do it, or even look on Deposit Photos or Shutterstock, because they're a good looking image that you could put in your book. That's a huge upgrade that costs you very little. Doing custom headers, which is a pretty easy thing to do, custom chapter headers. Or if you have Vellum allows you to format a book, and it can be a print on demand or a print run book with some really nice interior 2-page chapter spreads, things like that. So there's ways that you can offer things. I'm still going through the questions. Balancing profit versus extras. We just kind of talked about that. I'm interested in growing my readership. Yes. So the great thing about Kickstarter, like I said, I have a pretty large mailing list, and I don't have a whole lot of people coming over to Kickstarter from that. What I have been very fortunate in is that I've found a lot of readers on Kickstarter, which is, it's wonderful. There are book buyers on Kickstarter more all the time who are looking for projects to support. And they're not always just looking for big, flashy, fancy paperbacks, special editions, leather with diamonds inset. They're not worried about that. They just want to support some authors. Kickstarter backers get to be like low dollar angel investors, all working together to make something come to life. And if you have kind of an interesting take, something that's a little niche, a little funky. I have a friend who writes LGBTQ weird Westerns with flying Pegasuses who are magic. And she's a wonderful writer, but it's a series that has not done all that well on the retailers just because it falls into too many subgenres. And she's found a really loyal and supportive audience for those books on Kickstarter. There are people on Kickstarter who are looking for a little off the beaten path, a little out of the ordinary, a little niche. Interestingly enough, the big genres like contemporary romance is one of the biggest selling genres out there in the wider world, does not do all that well on Kickstarter. I think it's because that's perceived as maybe a little too mainstream, and the people on Kickstarter are not there to be mainstream. They're there to support interesting, slightly quirky projects, and a lot of fantasy books. If you have fantasy elements in your genre fiction, Kickstarter is a fabulous place for you. Mentioned Brandon Sanderson recently and his great big campaign that funded 42 million. That was back in March of 2022. That happened to be my first campaign ran concurrently, ran that same month. Again, luck and timing, which can play a big part in every aspect of a writer's career and journey. And I was early. I was still an early adopter 2 years ago on the book side of Kickstarter. In the last 2 years, it's really developed and become a much more robust ecosystem. There's still plenty of room. You can go in there and find people to support you, no question. But there have been some big fantasy authors that have brought their audience in to Kickstarter. Brandon Sanderson, obviously, before that, Michael J. Sullivan, who had a very interesting ride with being self-published and then going traditional and then going back to self-publishing. And one of the things that he did was he was able to raise a lot of money on Kickstarter because he brought his own people, but also because there's a lot of wonderful geeks and nerds on Kickstarter. I count myself amongst them because the game side and the RPG side of Kickstarter has been so robust for so long. So you have a lot of people who are into fantasy on Kickstarter. So I'm kind of hopping around a little bit, but yeah, so 2 years ago, March 2022, I ran my very first campaign. I did a print on demand omnibus of a backlist trilogy. So this was not a new book at all. It was a fantasy trilogy that had been out for about 6 years. And I decided I wanted to do an omnibus edition in hardcover. And that project funded over $7,000, which was just delightful. I was so thrilled. And that ignited my love of Kickstarter at that point, which is never ending, at least not yet. So print on demand, backlist omnibus in hardcover with a very nice design, but it was still not anything flashy, no swag, nothing like that. And it just really opened my eyes to the possibilities with backlist as well as front list. So one of the easier ways to get into Kickstarter, if you have some backlist and you don't have a hardcover edition, think about picking the first book in your series or maybe a standalone and putting it into a hardcover as your sort of your beginning on the way of your journey of Kickstarter. I'm trying to keep up here with the questions. I know I'm getting behind. Just getting into publishing and learning about the industry. It's a great concept. Yes, it is. A good number to have on a newsletter. Like I said, really depends. Sharing Kickstarter funds with an artist. Yeah, I mean, you could try a profit sharing thing. I would be more inclined to have the artwork lined up in advance, or some of the artwork lined up in advance, because it's a kind of a chicken or an egg thing where you want to have things to show off. Hey, support this, you get this, instead of support this and then there's going to be some art later. Like that's not nearly as enticing a prospect to prospective backers. So you really want to have pretty much most of what you're offering. What you would do, though, is you would set a stretch reward. So you've hit your base funding goal and you're like, wow, it would really be great if we could get up here. And then at that point, I'll be able to commission this artist for some more artwork. And the way you know you can do that is because you've built profit in at the different levels. So how much profit are we talking about? Bare minimum, you want to be pulling 40% of your Kickstarter funds as profit. And so you have to figure there's that 10% off the top for Kickstarter and credit card fees. Then there's a cost of making the book and delivering the book. And that's usually about 50% of your print. So if you have a hardcover and you're doing it through Ingram Spark, it's going to cost you $12 to print and another $3 or more to ship to you. So you have $15 worth of cost there. And so you're going to set your price at $30. But then you're going to remember that you have to add a little extra for Kickstarter. You're going to be charging, if you charge shipping, you got to add a 10% onto that. And if you are going to be signing the books, if you're not drop shipping, if you're going to be signing and packaging and shipping, then you have the extra shipping cost of the books coming to you out again, and also your packaging materials. So it's really important to sort of know all of the moving pieces of what's involved. But the great thing about print on demand is you can have your print on demand hardcover tier, and you can, maybe only a couple people pledge. If 20 people pledge, then you have X amount of profit no matter what. The profit is built in. 2 people, 20, 200. It's not like a print run where you're like, oh, I have to get this number of books. So definitely, if you are just kind of want to toe dip in Kickstarter, print on demand is a great way to go. And you can print on demand some beautiful, you can do kids books, you can do some gorgeous color, high quality premium color books. Lulu is your best bet for that. They're not cheap, but they're really, really nicely done. Ingram recently rolled out some little better quality color specs for their interior printing. And so if you're looking to do like a photo book or an art book or a kid's book, look into Ingram for that. Lulu, absolutely. Ingram, maybe. KDP, not at all. Yeah. So if you meet a funding goal, can you go up? Can you go in again and raise the goal? No, you cannot. Your funding goal is set once you launch the campaign. So you can kind of think about different ideas like, oh, what if I ask, like, what if no one comes? I want to set it for 500, and then you hit 500. That's fine. If you go on Kickstarter and look, campaigns are funded 600% over their funding goal, 1,000% over their funding goal. It's not seen as a negative to go over your funding goal. Again, the funding goal is a floor, not a ceiling. And if backers want your thing, it doesn't matter if you're 2,000% funded, people are going to want your thing and they're going to go in. So in that way, particularly for fiction, or for really all books, Kickstarter is functioning as a pre-order. So you're setting your goal at, this is what needs to happen to get this made. And if you say, hey, well, I have no costs. I did the art myself, and so there's only just the cost of each book, which the tiers will cover. I'm going to set my funding goal for $1. Kickstarter won't let you do that. They will give you the side eye and they'll say, no. So 500, reasonable if you feel like you have very few costs. 500 is a good place to start and go in at. And then it's fine if you go way over that. I have a friend recently who set her funding goal at 500, and I think she funded close to 50,000. Nobody cared that her initial goal was 500. I think I made her raise it to 1,000, but again, 50 times over the goal, and that's fine. That's not seen as a negative. So what is the percentage of people you might expect who find your product? Yes. And this kind of plays into the audience, like, who's going to find you on Kickstarter? Is there an audience there? Is there a readership there? Yes, particularly with fantasy adjacent things, because of Brandon Sanderson, Michael J. Sullivan, a bunch of other people successfully bringing their readers and bringing their audience to Kickstarter. That said, unless you have a super, super niche project that does not have very much wide appeal, where you're just bringing people, I would say you can expect at least 40% of your backers on Kickstarter to come directly from Kickstarter itself. If you have something with a little wider appeal, and if you make your campaign really compelling and reasonably priced, I've had up to 80% of my backers come via Kickstarter itself. And Kickstarter tracks this metric. And one of the other things that they do is they give you the ability to create any number of tagged links that you can share out, that when a backer comes in and pledges, you can look at that tag and say, oh, this was someone from my newsletter. This was someone from Facebook. Not only were they from Facebook, but they were from this particular group or even this particular post. So you can get very, very granular. Kickstarter allows you to make 500 of these tracking links per project. So you can hand them out to different people and say, oh, wow, Josephine shared this on her page and I got 5 backers just from her. So next time, Josephine, you're on my team, share it again. So there's you can tell Kickstarter, one of the wonderful things about Kickstarter as an author is they give you so much data. If you're used to just selling on retailers, all you get is some sales figures. One person bought your book. On Kickstarter, you know who it was, you know where they're from, you have the ability to interact with them. They'll message you, you'll message them. It's not 100% an open book, but we have so much information as authors, as creators on Kickstarter to actually interact directly with the people who are supporting us. And that's exciting and empowering. And you get the nicest messages, honestly. It's so sweet. So, yeah, so you will get people, one of the nice things about Kickstarter is that if your first campaign does okay, but doesn't blow it out of the water, don't be disheartened by that, because just like everything else, Kickstarter is a platform that you can grow, and you have, your second campaign will do a little better. Your third campaign, maybe you might step back a little, or maybe it'll do really well. And this is one thing I've seen campaign after campaign. So I've just finished running my 9th campaign. I'm getting ready to launch my 10th campaign on Kickstarter. And I don't see my backer numbers increasing every single project because I pulse my projects a little bit. I don't go back to the same well over and over. So my first project was for a 3-book complete trilogy fantasy omnibus with dark elves and romance elements, and it was completely secondary world fantasy. My second project was for a collection of steampunk short stories that I'd written and were not in any kind of physical form. So I just did a paperback of short stories. And that campaign funded close to $6,000, I think. And then my third campaign was for a quirky little art book, and that funded $2,500. And then my fourth campaign was for special editions of the first 3 books in my Phalanx series. And that campaign funded $18,000. So, and I've had sometimes the backers for the bigger campaigns, I have bigger backers. Sometimes I have more backers for the smaller campaigns. So I kickstarted the Kickstarter for Author book about how to kickstart a book on Kickstarter. That always just cracks me up. But that one, I funded $11,000, but I had a ton of ebook backers and people who just wanted the digital book. And so I had just shy of 500 backers on that, but that was sort of mid-level funding campaigns. So number of backers and amount of average pledge are 2 important things to factor in when you're trying to figure out how much money can I make on Kickstarter? If you are only offering, for example, an ebook campaign, a digital campaign, and you're like, $5, get my ebook, then you're going to need a lot of backers to get up to, significant money funding levels. But you're going to have a very high profit margin. because you're not having to create any physical product, right? That said, Kickstarter backers, pretty much the order from the top down to the bottom of perceived value, hardcovers. Hardcovers are, even if you think, oh, I write science fiction, do I really need to do a hardcover? Yeah, do a hardcover. Romance, hardcover. Fantasy, 1,000% hardcover. Then paperbacks. There's people who are like, I love to read my physical book, but I can't quite spring the hardcover. Paperback, then ebook. And there are definitely, I think, a growing number of ebook only readers on Kickstarter. So you always want to have an ebook tier, unless, of course, you're in Kindle Unlimited, and then you can't. And then down at the very bottom, which is kind of sad for all of us authors, is audio. Because that's the number one thing that people come into the Kickstarter for Authors group and say, oh, Kickstarter, I'm so excited, I can finally make that audiobook. You can fund an audiobook on Kickstarter, but it funds primarily on the print rewards. So if you want to make an audiobook, what you really need to do is a campaign for the whole book with a hardcover, a paperback, ebook, and then also an audiobook available. Pure audio only campaigns are really, really tough to fund for a number of reasons, which I discuss in my book and which we talk about in the Kickstarter for Authors group all the time. I know it's a bummer. For us as authors, that's like the top thing. Yay, we can do this. But it's unfortunately a little more complicated than that. So print costs using Canva for designing has been an eye-opener. Yes, so one of the things about Kickstarter is that it's a very visually heavy campaign. So as writers, as authors, one of the big missteps that I see people make a lot is wall of text campaign. Like, I'm a writer, let me write everything out about my campaign. And you really need to have a lot of visual appeal when you're doing a Kickstarter campaign. And the best way to know what kind of visual appeal is to get on there and start looking at projects, which we're going to do a little walkthrough in just a second, and that'll be a lot of fun. But the best way to really understand Kickstarter is to get on the platform, start looking at projects, start seeing what's funding really well and what is struggling to fund, and start backing a couple campaigns. And this is going to do two really important things. Well, I'll do three important things. One is it'll help you understand the kind of barriers of entry that your readers and fans might have in terms of backing Kickstarter. Two, it's going to give you a much better understanding of what happens kind of behind the scenes. They call it behind the backer wall. How does a Kickstarter creator interact with the Kickstarter backers? What kinds of give and take are there? What is a survey, and what does it look like when it arrives in your mailbox? And then the third thing is that Kickstarter backers like to support creators who are part of the ecosystem. So very rarely I see creators come and they're like, I want $10,000, give me the money. I have not backed any projects on Kickstarter. I'm not interested in this platform except for that it'll give me money, right? So start backing projects and it will give you some cred. And there also is a fourth thing that's kind of a little fuzzy, but there seems to be anecdotal evidence that if you've backed some projects, presumably those are something you like, then when you launch your campaign, the Kickstarter algorithm has a little bit to go on. Like, who should I show this campaign to? And this is how Kickstarter backers find you on Kickstarter. Kickstarter actually has a really nicely robust recommendation engine where campaigns are shown all over the site in different places. You get them served up to you at the end of some emails, and it's just, Kickstarter is trying to help people see your campaign who would be a good fit. And if you've backed some campaigns already, the algorithms have an inkling of who those people might be based on who you are, if that makes sense. So if you're at all interested in Kickstarter, get in there and start following, start backing, and get involved. with the platform. I know we've kind of just switched over to answering a lot of questions, which a writing sample, not very much. So it is a good idea when you're making your Kickstarter to send people somewhere that they can read a sample. I would not paste it in the body of the Kickstarter. Again, that's too text heavy. Kickstarter is a highly visual platform. What a lot of people do is they'll put a little excerpt maybe on BookFunnel, or they'll put it on their website. I generally put like a hidden page on my website and then just send people from the Kickstarter, go read a sample if you're interested. I don't send them to Amazon. I don't send them to retailers. Even with my backlist books, I want to keep them in my ecosystem and in a place they can easily then at the end of the sample, click the button, go back to Kickstarter, so that people don't get completely pulled out. You just want to give people a little sample, maybe 1-2 chapters. Doesn't have to be huge. There's other people who say, oh, 5-6 chapters. Yeah, you know, whatever works for you, but a little bit, definitely. It is a good place for nonfiction, and it depends on what kind of nonfiction you write, right? So memoir, I think, struggles a little bit, but some sort of more niche books, particularly if you can bring a following, is great. Art books, quirky art books actually do pretty well there. I think the post office mural books could do really well. Poetry, I've seen poetry, you know, people who are not known in the poetry field at all, just regular poets, you know, usually can fund $2,000-3,000 for their books, for their chapbooks, that's exciting. That's great for poets. Yes, I have some poetry that I've been collecting, and one of these days I'm going to do my poetry chapbook, but we'll see. Is it a good place for poetry? That's funny. I didn't even read that comment, but yes. How do picture books do on Kickstarter? So in Kickstarter, you can search by the different publishing categories, and like poetry, like fiction, like nonfiction. Picture books, like, are you talking kids books? Are you talking art books? You can search those and see what kind of projects are out there. How have they done? How are they set up? The Kickstarter is your own best teacher. And the thing is, it also is changing. It's a dynamic platform. So something that a couple of years ago was like, didn't do all that well on Kickstarter, maybe that's starting to do better, you know. So pay attention to the live projects as well as sort of some of the historical. It's important to know that a Kickstarter campaign never disappears off the platform. So everything is searchable. The only campaigns you can't see the information about are the ones that are canceled. Then you can't really see, but campaigns that do not fund successfully are still on there, and then every successful campaign is on there as well. So you can do a deep dive to educate yourself a lot about the platform and about what's possible there. Why don't use KDP for print on demand? For a number of reasons. Particularly, I was talking about for a color picture book or an art book, their quality is just not there on the high end of color image options and high quality paper choices. It's just, KDP is for genre books. I also wouldn't use it necessarily to print books for your Kickstarter. And I go into great depth about this in my book, Kickstarter for Authors. And also we talk about it sometimes in the Kickstarter for Authors Facebook group. But Ingram Spark and Book Vault are really your two best, most competitive places to print basic books. And then Lulu makes gorgeous books, but they're more expensive. Book Vault is based out of the UK, and they are just on the verge of rolling out some very, very exciting things, including foiling on dust jackets and on cases. And this is something that's very, very exciting to all the people who want to offer something a little extra, a little special via a Kickstarter, but don't really want to say, well, my funding goal is $5,000 because I'm having to fund a print run from any number of printing houses that are out there. So that really that's a way to get a little blingy without having to, chew your nails to the quick to wait to see if you hit your $5,000 funding goal. There is a digital short run that can be very high quality, better options in POD, but also the ability to do much smaller runs. Yeah, there is. They tend to be pretty spendy. So 48-hour print can do some nice things. They can do some custom foiling on the covers. They can do some color interiors, but your book cost is going to go way up with those. So short run printing is an option, and your cost is going to be pretty high. Sometimes, your cost is going to be like $40 a book, depending. And Kickstarter backers are not going to support an $80, book that's not all glammed out necessarily. So you have to kind of balance your costs and your expectations of what will Kickstarter backers support. Kickstarter backers are happy to pay $5 for an ebook. They are happy to pay $25 for a paperback, $40 for a hardcover, up to, in some cases, $100, depending on how glammed out it is. But they're not made of money. And also Kickstarter backers are savvy, so they're going to know when you're asking sort of eyebrow raising amounts over the norm. You have to have a good reason to do so if you're going to be working outside of those brackets. Is there a certain time frame in which the end product needs to be delivered? Within a year, ideally. One of the things that I do is I offer a digital copy of my books with all of my print tiers. So if someone orders the paperback, they also are going to get the ebook, and then they'll get the ebook earlier while the paperback is in production. Generally, though, Kickstarter backers know that it's not going to happen right away, and depending on how complicated your book is, they'll wait 6 months, sometimes a year. That's kind of stretching it in book world. And the other thing to keep in mind is that Kickstarter, if you want to run a couple Kickstarters, they want to see your rewards delivered on your first campaign before you roll out your second campaign at all. So if you're thinking you want to do a couple Kickstarters a year, you want to be delivering rewards in a more timely manner. That said, figure out when you think the rewards are going to be delivered, and then add another month on that, because there's going to be delays, there's going to be all kinds of things, and it's better to underpromise and overdeliver, right, than the reverse. Ask me how I know. I'm very optimistic about my Kickstarter timelines. It's got me in a little bit of trouble, but not much. So then another important factor about that, if you are doing a new release on Kickstarter, or if you're doing a fancy edition that then is going to go to retailers, like my hardcover omnibus that I did, Kickstarter backers really should be getting that thing a couple months. They should be getting it in their hands a couple months before the bigger release. Part of the perk of supporting on Kickstarter is you get the thing early, and backers expect that. They expect, hey, I got the thing, I got it early. That's part of why I support on Kickstarter, is because I can be among the first, and not, oh, and next week it was on the retailer, and then why didn't I just wait? So those are some timing things to think about when it comes to running your Kickstarter.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I wonder if we should take a break. If there was anything you wanted to screen share to show us on Kickstarter, maybe now would be a good time to do that.
Yeah, that's a great idea. There's a lot of questions in here. Oh my goodness.
I know we could go all night. I mean, I myself put in several of those questions.
That's great. That's exciting. Let me go to Kickstarter. So screen share, it's in here somewhere. Share screen. Are you all seeing it?
Not yet.
Which screen does it
There you
want?
go. Okay.
Okay. Oh, that's exciting. Okay, that's Zoom. I don't want that. Stop. How do I move this? Just like that. Okay. So let's go. Let's go to Kickstarter.com. So here we are in Kickstarter. Can you all see my screen?
Yep.
Awesome. So here we go. Kickstarter.com. And let's just scoot this all down. So it can be a little overwhelming at first. There's a lot of pictures and things they're showing us, and you can say, oh, this is they're spotlighting some things. There's some other things on here that are recommended, particularly for me, recommended for you. They know what I like. But let's say you're just here and you're like, how do I begin? Up here on the top is each type of category. We're going to go here to publishing, and you can just click publishing. And then we had the subcategories. Whoops, they went away. Let's go back. Publishing, publishing, academic anthologies, art books, etc. Okay, it went away. But let me show you. This is now we are actually in the Discover platform. So Kickstarter search is confusing, but either way, you're going to click and you're going to end up with something like this. And it's a whole bunch of fields showing me publishing projects on Earth sorted by magic. If we click publishing, it's going to give us the drop down that shows us academic, anthologies, art books, calendars, children's books, comedy, fiction, letterpress, literary journals, literary spaces. This is people who are actually trying to fund a bookstore on Kickstarter. Nonfiction, periodicals, poetry, radio and podcast, translations, young adult zines. Let's go to fiction. So now we're looking at all of the fiction projects on Earth. You kind of makes you think that maybe Mars is a category. It's not. If you only want to be looking for projects in the US or maybe in your particular area in Washington or in Seattle, you can narrow down that way. But for the most part, you'll have them on Earth. And then sorted by magic, it defaults to magic. That's kind of the default, but you can look at a couple of different ways of looking. I like to go to end date. That shows me the projects that are just about to end on Kickstarter. So then we have here all of these different projects that are ending pretty soon. This one has 1 hour left. It's 149% funded. And it's obviously a sci-fi Galactic Kata Bounty Hunter Special Edition hardcover. So that's funded. There's two ways you can tell. It says 149% funded, and it has this green bar all the way across the bottom. So that one has funded. Hollow Bones audiobook. Here's one that funded an audiobook. So this is great. Let's click that. Click. Let's go see about the Hollow Bones audiobook. They had a 3,000 pound funding goal. They just made it. So 3,000 pounds is 3,796 US. They're less than $100 over that with 11 hours to go. That would stress me out. The other reason to set a lower funding goal, if you don't need the full amount to fund your project, is as soon as you hit it, you know you've hit your goal and you know that your Kickstarter is going to happen. Right. So this person probably did at least a 3-week campaign, maybe a 4-week campaign. And most of that was probably on tenterhooks, waiting to see if their project was going to fund or not. So that's kind of scary. They do a lot of things right. We have the title, the subtitle, and then this is the video where they're going to talk about their campaign. And then we get into Kickstarter has two kind of sides, three on your screen. The far left is the table of contents, so we can click through and look at that. The middle is the section called the story, and that has everything about your story. And look at all those graphics. They do a great job of breaking up about 3 paragraphs max. Here is just 2 and then an image. So lots and lots and lots of images. Very important. I just caught something right here. This was a SPFBO, Self-Publishing Fantasy Blog Off finalist. So they had a little bit of a following. They had a little bit of cred to draw people in. So yay, they funded their audiobook. They're so happy. Over here on the far right-hand side is your reward tiers. So first there's the author bio, Tim Hardy. And then we go down and here's the available rewards. And they go in order of pledge. So Roll of the Dice short story, ebook, £5. That seems pretty high for me. And before we look and see how many people pledged, I'm just going to say it's probably not a huge amount. But this is a 5 backers. So this part right here, number of backers, is hugely crucial for you to pay attention to when you're trying to figure out what's working on Kickstarter. Because you could look and you could say, oh, they did it. They raised almost $4,000. They're making their audiobook. That's awesome. Kickstarter's great. But you have to understand what the backers are going for. Only 5 people thought a short story for $7 was a good idea, right? So that's an important data point to know. Continuing to scroll down, we have the mini audiobook. What is a mini audiobook? It's a short story collection. All the tales funded by this campaign, about 13. I'm going to say, before we even go down and look at the backers, again, this did not have a huge number of takers because it's not a full audiobook. Two takers. So the reason being that around $13 is what audio files are used to paying for a full audiobook. Almost no one pays that $25 Audible suggested retail price. If people are really into audiobooks, they are buying credits on Audible, which are about $12 a credit, sometimes less, or they are whisper syncing to the ebook and on Amazon, and then picking up the audiobook for an extra $7.50. And if most ebooks are $5, then they're paying about $12.50. Or they are going to look at other platforms where authors can set the prices, and the prices are between $10 and $15 for an audiobook. So $13 for a short collection wasn't very interesting to backers, 2 of them. Next, we have mini audiobook and ebook, $19. Probably a few more people jumped in here. They're feeling like, okay, it's a package deal, got some stuff. 5. So 5 people jumped in there. You can see we've not funded $4,000 or anything close to it at this point with just audio and digital. Here's a bundle of anthologies in ebook for about $28. That's a little steep. Probably a few more takers. I'm guessing double digits on this one. Nope, I was wrong. 2. Okay. Hollow Bones audiobook, £25, 32 US dollars. That very few takers here. 20, I'm shocked. But still, 20 people pledging $30 is not getting you even close to the $4,000 that they were asking for. We have audiobook and a poster. 3 people went for that. Audiobook and anthologies bundle. And 2 backers there. All funded audiobooks and posters. So now we're starting to get up to like some bigger packages. And this is where backlist plays a really important role, because this is all the previous, and they had the ebooks as well and the audiobooks. Without the backlist giving some larger tiers, 5 people jumped in at about $100. So there's $500 right there. But without that backlist, this campaign would have really been struggling, right? And here we go to all audiobooks and a paperback. This is, I think they did a misstep here. I would have offered the paperback by itself much, much earlier in the campaign, because there's people who are not audiobook fans and they're not ebook fans. They just wanted a print reward. So I think that was a misstep here in this campaign. And no one's going for it because that's very, very expensive if you're interested in just print. So let's see if there's other print tiers. Okay, here we have the signed series bundle, and we've got print, 1 backer. Again, because it's pretty spendy. Are you going to spend $200 for 4 books? No. So this is a good campaign to look at and to kind of study and see. Oh, so they have these high tiers, but 0 backers, right? 0 backers. Signed books, 0 backers. Fully signed series, 0 backers. So be aware that when you make your tiers, that's one thing, but how many people are going to actually go for your tiers is another thing altogether. Let's look at one more campaign here. Let's look at one that I'm well aware of. Okay, here's Candace Osmond, the Iron World series collector's edition omnibus. So this is a single book. There's Candace. Hi. When you hover over, the video starts playing. So Candace does a great job here. You can tell that she's on camera, she's talking, she's excited about her books. It's not a general book trailer. It's actually a place where you, as a creator, are talking about what you're bringing to Kickstarter. And backers really like that. They like that connection with the creator. They like to see you on camera. Candace has done very, very well with her Kickstarter campaign. Single book, omnibus. She's up over $30,000 for this one. But she set it up beautifully. And it's also romantasy, which is very hot right now, romantic fantasy. And she has laid this out. The artwork is incredible. She calls out her comps, ACOTAR, which, if you know, A Court of Thorns and Roses, Buffy, Shadowhunters, Kickstarter exclusive, romantasy books in one with a foiled dust jacket, hardcover, collector's edition. She's had 200 backers. That's a pretty large pledge average to raise $33,000 from 200 people. And one of the things we get into here is that whole 1,000 true fans idea, right? You want to find those people who love what you do and are willing to pay you real money for it. And Kickstarter is one of those places. So just really quick, if we go down, we can see how beautifully branded Candace's whole campaign is. She does a trope graphic, so you know exactly what you're getting out of the book. She has a, do you like this? Do you like that? Are you a fan of, like, really letting backers know this, if you like these things, this campaign is for you, and keep reading. And she's got stretch goals. She's opened almost all of them, coloring pages, and the audiobook at 50K Canadian. She's got a day left. She might hit it. We'll see. About her world, maps. So leaning on the fantasy side of things, lots of fantasy backers. The main characters, little character things. I mean, just graphically so pretty, so well done. It keeps drawing you in. It keeps drawing you in. Read a snippet. You can click out there about the exclusive books. Here's the dust jacket. Here's the case underneath that's foiled. That's very common, and that's a really fun thing you can do with Kickstarter, is have a case design that's different from the dust jacket design. It's fairly inexpensive way to really bring your book up to the next level. Gold foiling, so then the specs, 6x9, 750 pages, 3-in-1, dust jacket, antique gold foiling, reverse dust jacket. So turn it inside out. That's something that romantasy readers really love. Duplex cover for the paperback, interior illustrations, like you know exactly what you're getting here. And sprayed edges, the sword on the edge. This is all very, very super deluxe and early bird rewards. You don't have to do those. That's a more advanced thing. We'll look at the tiers. And so now I'm gonna just move my mouse over to the right and we'll look here. So book 3 early access release, $4. She probably did well. 11 backers. Ebook, $12 for the entire ebook omnibus. I predict she did very well here. Almost 30 backers of that one. These 2 tiers being digital are almost pure profit, right? The ebook bundle with artwork. There are people who are like, yeah, give me the artwork, I'm interested. 6. Not as many as the people who just want the book. So always give people the option of just the book. Don't force people to also have to get your swag. Paperbacks, a little spendy. Yeah, 7 backers. The people who are here to spend money are going to be holding out for the hardcovers, and that's where she's got her big number of backers. 116 people have backed the omnibus at $93. So people are like, give me the gorgeous book. Also, shipping is charged after this, so people are going to be paying more. But there are people on Kickstarter who want beautiful books or interesting books and are willing to pay a lot. Signed hardcover of the series 1, 2, 3, not the omnibus, a few people. She did a box, right? This is common in fantasy romance particularly. So about $220 US, includes a mug, stickers, map, pin, crown, and a special box. 100 people, 10 people went for that. But at $200 a pop, that's $2,000, right? So what else does she have? The collector's bundle. 4 people said, yes, I want to pay you $250 for the collector's bundle. So there's another $1,000. Ultimate bookish book, almost, so $480 US. All kinds of things in here, right? Signed collector's editions, paperbacks, art, mug, stickers, blanket, elf ear cuffs, journal, moon lamp. I know some of you are looking at all of this and just about to fall out of your chair and say, this is so complicated. There's no way I can't run a Kickstarter because I can't do these things. This is way out on the other end of like crazy Kickstarter, right? She had 7 people jump in for that. And then, but look, there's more. There's even more. She has done a lot of Kickstarters, so she's put all of her special editions. Did you miss any of my last ones? 3 people pledged $1,000 to get those books. And then that's it. Now we're at the end. So this is an example of, yes, we saw that she raised $33,000, and this is how she did it. But she's also a pro at Kickstarter. She's done this for a long, long time. She understands how it works. She understands how to get backers on board with beautiful graphics. And if we look at Candace right here, oh, we've got to roll up. You can snoop on the creators too and see who are they. She's done 5 campaigns already. She's backed 17, so she's been in there supporting as well. So just going into fiction, looking at campaigns that are ending soon, gives you a really good idea of what final funding is looking like, right? As opposed to looking at, we're going to roll. I know I'm taking so much time. Thank you all for hanging with me. Let's see. Newest. These are campaigns that just launched today. Their funding goals are going to be much lower because they just launched. Dean Wesley Smith. Chris and Dean have been running Kickstarters for several years, and they have it dialed in. If you want to study a whole variety of Kickstarters, just go and check out what Dean has been doing. This is one of Chris's Fae novels. It's a new release. and it has a lot of people who are interested. But let's find something that looks kind of a little more just a book, if you please. So we've been looking at all of these like amazing, these books are doing great. And then here's just a basic contemporary romance. And it's going much slower. It's going much pokier. This is the funded amount up here that she's made of her goals so far. And with a $10,000 goal, she's not going to hit it. Unfortunately, this is a campaign that is not going to fund. And it's a little unclear why she's asking for $10,000 for not special edition, right? Do you notice something about her campaign story? Oh, finally, we get an image. So there's almost no images in there. So she's not really doing the best practices or leaning heavily into how to use a Kickstarter, right? So it's a little light, it's a little thin. And so she probably is an author who saw, oh, people are bringing in $33,000 on Kickstarter. I'm going to put my books up and make $33,000. But of course, there's a difference, right? So I am going to stop screen sharing in just a sec, but just go to Kickstarter, go to Discover or click into the categories and just start poking around and seeing what's out there. And be a smart browser, because you're also looking at the number of backers for each tier to see what people are supporting. Okay, I think we have like just a few minutes left. So what resources did I use to create my campaigns? I studied Kickstarter the way you just saw me doing. I took a look at campaigns, I analyzed them, I broke them down, and then I started a group called Kickstarter for Authors where we could all geek about this together. And then I ended up writing a book. So that is the resource that I would recommend for you all. The book is called Kickstarter for Authors. And let me throw in a link. You can order it from my direct store, which would be awesome because then you're supporting me more directly. You can get the ebook, the paperback, or the hardcover. And there's the link right there to my direct store. And that is everything I've learned from running all my campaigns, from studying Kickstarter closely, from being in a group of now 4,500 authors who share information, tips, everything about Kickstarter. Oh yes, so multiple books. What I would do if you're new to Kickstarter, and also if you have you want to fund a series on Kickstarter, but they're not all done yet, I would do them one at a time. Because what you're going to do is you're going to see a nice build from campaign to campaign. It's a lot more balls to keep in the air if you're trying to set up 3 books and run a campaign for 3 books and do all of the formatting and all of the artwork and everything for 3 books. So I think my advice, if you think you want to launch a series on Kickstarter, I would start with book 1 and do that one, particularly if the series isn't finished. If it is finished and it's 3 books, then maybe all 3 at once. But I've seen authors just launch their series one by one. So what you do is you launch book 1. Your next Kickstarter is for book 2, and book 1 is also included for new people who haven't seen your stuff before. And you will have always, whatever you are doing, you will always have the opportunity to get new backers. So whenever you set up a Kickstarter, you want it to appeal to people who have never heard of you, never read your books. So if it's deeper into a series, when you do book 3, you're going to also offer book 1 and book 2. You can offer things that are available if they're not the main thrust of your Kickstarter. So Kickstarter is to bring a new project to life. But if that's book 3 of a series, of course, offer books 1 and 2 as well. That's perfectly fine. Does that make sense? And here's my link. Good, thank you. There's all kinds of graphics programs. Some do BookBrush, some do Canva. An omnibus is a collection of a couple of books under one binding. So a trilogy under one binding is an omnibus.
I noticed a couple of questions from Scott that I thought were interesting. There's kind of a two-part here. One is, can you elaborate a little bit more on the stretch goals? And two is, how do you build in any kind of guardrails to the project, like to make sure that it doesn't go gangbusters and then you can't actually even fill all the orders?
So yeah, a lot of people worry, is this going to fund? Is my Kickstarter going to succeed? But what happens when you have wild success and now all of a sudden you're looking at packing 400 books for orders? So you have to plan for success as well as less success. Luckily, there's a couple of, I have friends who've started with kind of a smaller book campaign and then it blew up and they ended up having enough to pay for a print run so they could add some more, and then working with a fulfillment house. Merrick Books does Kickstarter fulfillment. Andrew Cobble is also a fantasy author, and he will also help. He won't do the printing for you, but if you can get your print books to him, he will, for a very reasonable amount, ship them out all over from his warehouse. Or you can do print on demand and just like Book Vault, actually, you can send them a Excel file of the addresses and the names, and they will actually input that and get all your books out. So there are ways you can deal with the fulfillment, but fulfillment can be a challenge. Absolutely. And that's why you also want to give yourself a little more time. I talk about that pretty in depth in my group.
And what are the stretch goals?
So stretches, I am really quick. I am grabbing my my link to my PDF. So this is a free PDF that you can get on BookFunnel. And this is my 12-page comprehensive Kickstarter campaign checklist. And feel free to use it, print it out multiple times. Please don't share it around outside of this group is all. Stretch goals are a way of giving those psychological. So let's say you set a $500 funding goal. All your friends and fans and readers showed up first day, and now you've met your goal, and you have a 20-day campaign. Like, where do we go from here? What happens when we raise a lot of money? So stretch goals are a way of giving more rewards, opening up some bonuses, enhancing the things that you're offering as the campaign goes on after you've already funded, if that makes sense. That's a great question. And again, the book goes in depth on that, and you can find out a lot about that in the Kickstarter for Authors group, which I expect to see everyone in. And I'm going to go approve all your pending, unless my wonderful admins already have, which they might have. Are there other questions that came in? Let's see.
Yeah, I didn't see, where's the link for the 12-page PDF? I didn't see that one.
That's on the, I popped it in the chat. It should be at the bottom of the chat. Missing the PDF link. Oh,
yeah, it didn't show up.
That went directly to Michelle. I don't know why. It didn't go in the main chat. Oh, I'm stuck in direct messaging.
Yeah, you have to change that.
Yeah, that explains it. Oh my goodness. Let's try that. Did you all see that?
Yeah, thank you.
Good. Yes, thank you. Thanks for grabbing that. The Into the Darkwood special hardback omnibus, which was my very first campaign. Yeah, I just did my stretches on the fly and I tried to figure it out as I went. But I also studied campaigns pretty intensively before then. So again, a lot of it is just study similar campaigns to what you think you want to be doing. So
one more question here. So Holly asked, and I don't know it either. What is an omnibus? I don't know it either. So
an omnibus is when you collect several books under one binding. So
Oh,
the 3-book trilogy, instead of doing each book separately, all 3 of them are together on a big 700-page hunky hardcover, and that is an omnibus.
oh,
Yeah. And like Candace's $33,000 campaign we were looking at, she has an omnibus, which is why people were paying $93 for that, is because I think hers is a 3 or maybe a 3-book compilation. So you're actually getting 3 books in the special edition. So, okay, that was a fire hose of information. I hope you're not reeling too terribly from all the things. And I hope that I gave somewhat of an overview and gave people some places to start. Don't be overwhelmed by looking at the big fancy Kickstarters. Look at Dean Wesley Smith. Look at the campaigns that they have done. They have done some only digital campaigns. They've done some very basic paperback campaigns. All campaigns don't have to raise into the double digits or into the triple digits. It's fine to do a campaign that raises $1,200 because that's an extra $1,200 minus fees and expenses. But you probably have at least an extra 6, 7, maybe 8 if you have a lot of digital rewards, extra money coming in to help defray the cost of your books, and to but even more than that, there's a lot of intangibles to running a Kickstarter, which are a lot having to do with interacting with readers, even a small handful of readers who are so excited about your books, who really want to support you with real money. They're not like, it's a 99. Why are you asking $4 for the next book? People who are really happy to pay authors what they're worth. And that's kind of priceless, honestly.